here's how you can agentify your entire software development lifecycle with tools like Antigravity. So let's just get right into it. I wanted to start with a common complaint about agentic coding, which is people write a lot of features, but then they write a lot of bugs too. More code tends to naturally lead to more tech debt. And in my opinion, part of the reason why we have these problems is because we tend to over-rely on these agents to generate code, but not enough for maintaining it, reviewing it, or testing it. And that's exactly the motivation behind this talk. So I wanted to quickly walk through the simplified version of SDLC. That's first identify and understand the issue, and then design a solution, implement it, review and test it. Obviously, this doesn't cover all of SDLC, but this should be sufficient for the purpose of this discussion here. So I'll go through all of these steps one by one. First, identifying and understanding the issue. I have two example issues to cover here as examples. And the first one is actually simple enough that it doesn't have to be agentified, but it'll be important later on in this talk. And to give you a little bit of context for this, if you go to your GitHub account and then change the URL to gitfoot.com/your username, then you get this view, this website where you get sort of a score for your contributions. You get different stats like commits, stars earned, and so on. And you get an overall score to sort of a football, soccer card kind of thing. And the nice thing about it is that it's open sourced. So I was looking through it and I found this issue, which I copied exactly to my own fork. And this issue is, again, short enough so that I can just read it myself. But just to quickly explain it, the problem this person had was this person's last name was this, but it was showing up as this. And later on in this talk, again, we're going to come back to this and think about how to solve it. One more example I wanted to quickly show here is this issue on the open source repo that I've been part of for a while, Daft, an open source data processing library. And if you look through this issue, you'll notice that it's pretty complex. There's this attached discussion that's also sort of complex on its own. So I could totally read it myself, sort of sentence by sentence, but I found that a nice way to agentify this process is just by giving it to tools like Antigravity and saying, can you summarize this issue as well as the attached discussion and tell me what's going on? What's the problem exactly? What's the status? So that way you can speed up the process of identifying and understanding the issue. And it's especially important when there are a lot of discussions going on and when there are a lot of attached PRs and issues and so on. So going forward, as that runs in the background, in the SDLC, the next step is designing your solution. And for that, I have a few examples here as well. I'll just close these for now. The first one is going back to the Gitfoot example. By the way, I'm not associated to this project in any way. I just am a fan of the project. I was looking at my own card and I noticed, I have this score and these stats, but I thought, how good is it really? What does this number mean? I thought it would be, convenient to be able to see a distribution of all GitHub users and where you rank, in relation to them, sort of in a distribution way. So I decided to implement this feature and actually, sent this PR. The idea is, you add this new distribution tab so that you can see your top X% of GitHub or top X% of active devs. And for this, I needed to design a couple things. I needed to design the visual look of it, which is sort of trivial in comparison to the more system side of things, which is like, how do you actually gather this data in a privacy-friendly way? How do you store them? How do you show them? And that was all the design decisions I needed to make. And for that, I actually had a long conversation with a coding agent, and I needed to ask questions like, what's a good way to fetch all this data? Can I fetch 20,000 accounts? And it turns out I am able to do that. And in the end, what I ended up doing was I ended up fetching about 20,000 accounts, and I stored them again in a privacy-friendly, anonymized way in the code itself, so it's efficient. You can look at the PR itself to see how it was implemented. And I also looked at how many were active in the past year. So this goes into a little bit of implementation as well, but this is an example where an agentified process for this particular part of SDLC was really helpful. Moving forward to the implementation section, but I think our job should be back, so let's take a look at what we have here for the earlier prompt. So just to quickly remind you, we were looking at this issue, and it's summarizing the core problem for me with the growth of embodied intelligence robotics and so on. It says, it doesn't natively support reading or writing this format, so we need to solve it in a certain way. Current status, and if I want to dig into certain parts of it, or if I think this is too long, I could say, okay, you gave me a lot of information. It's a lot for me to read, so can you summarize it further? And also give me a summary of this PR that you mentioned, 7184. So this is a process that I use a lot, where I go back and forth with the agent to dig into certain issues, or to dig into certain materials. I might ask it to open certain pages so that I can dig into those things myself too. Now, moving on the implementation part, I have one example here where I'll see how much of it I'm able to implement. Again, going back to the previous issue that I mentioned, if you look at the original issue, if you look at this original person who submitted it, you can see that his name is structured this way, 3 names. I'm not going to pronounce it because I'm not sure how. And his last name is this. But then the app thinks that his last name is just the last part. So let's take a look here. Actually, it looks like it was fixed, but on my fork, it was not fixed. And it looks like they went on the route of automatically, detecting that this is, maybe the last 2 names that are the last name. But that's not always the case, right? It's kind of tricky because, for example, I have a middle name. So if I put in my name, if I had my full name on my accounts, then it would be, my first name, middle name, and last name. And if you say the last 2 names are the last name, then that would be wrong. It would have the middle name and last name. So you can kind of think about designing a solution, and then implementing it. But the way I would personally solve it, it might be different from the way they solved it, was, I would make it customizable. And actually, this particular issue already mentioned, that approach. He said, this shows this name, and he says this might not be easy as GitHub only has a setting for full name, but maybe the user can change the appearance of their name on the card, like they can pick a country. So what they mean by that, I think I can close all of these. What they mean by that is there is a way to pick your country here. So if I want to pick Canada, I can put Canada here. And the way it's stored is in the URL parameter. it says country CA. So if I go to a new page, it's stored. If I remove it, it's removed as well. So then what he's saying is, let's make it customizable like that, which I think is a reasonable approach. So at that point, I have designed the solution. I have identified what the problem is. Then I can go ahead and start implementing this. And the way I would personally go about it is I would first get the URL of the project you want to implement. In this particular case, I'm going to be using the fork, so I don't have to affect the original project. I have this projects folder where I'm planning to have all my Antigravity built projects, so Antigravity knows where to look for them. Okay, so now that we know what the issue is and what the design and implementation should be, I'll start implementing it. The way I would do it is I would take the URL of the repo you're working on, in this case, this particular fork, and I'll say, I'm working on this repository. It is a fork. Make sure to stay on this fork. I'm not sure if it's cloned yet. If not, you can clone it. If it's already cloned, you can pull the latest version and switch to the main or master branch. I think I'll start there. And then I can describe the issue. I'll say allow everything here. I think I can allow all of these. And then I'll say, so I'm working on this issue. The way I want to work on it is I want it to be like the country selector. If you look at the country selector, you can see that there is an option to hover over the country selector on my card or on anyone's card, and then select it, and that's stored in the URL parameter. Can we do the same thing for the name? So for the name within the card, maybe there's an overlay element. I can hover over it. I can edit the name to whatever I want it to be so that it's also stored in the URL parameter. So that's the kind of prompt I would use for this particular task. And this will probably take a little bit of time. So cooking show style, I have a couple of branches that are a little bit, a few steps ahead of this point. So I wanted to show you what that looks like that way. I already have the gitfoot repo cloned here. And I'll just, let Antigravity sit here just so they don't, it doesn't interfere with what I already have here. I'll switch to demo 1 branch, and I don't remember the command for running it locally, so I'll just ask that, Antigravity for that part. I've been working on this project, but I forgot how to run this project. Was it npm run dev? Remind me and actually run it for me so I can check it. I think npm run dev was correct. It looked at package.json, and then it's running it for me, it looks like. So I'll just have it here. And then if I go here, it should work. Okay. There is no data for my account, but I can look at Linus Torvalds' account. So here, there should be a way to edit it. Maybe not quite in demo 1. Let me check demo 2 here. Okay, so here, you can see that there's a way to edit this. And then if he wants to use, let's say his full name, you should be able to do it that way. It's stored in the URL parameter. And this is actually something I built with Antigravity earlier. And this is, to me, the most comprehensive solution instead of trying to be smart about which part is the last name exactly. Maybe I just I want to use my first name only or my nickname. So this is the most flexible and comprehensive solution in my opinion. And once that's done, we can go to the next step, which is reviewing and testing. And for that, I have sort of a complete version of this PR that I was just working on. I have the title and a description all generated through Antigravity, and I have these files. Let's say that someone else on my team, created this PR, or maybe I created this PR, I forgot about it a little bit, and I want to review it again, or I want to make sure, it's good before sending it for review. And there's a lot here, and there are a couple ways to review it. Obviously, you can review everything manually, but I found that sort of a interactive way of reviewing it is pretty effective. So I'll say something like, I have this PR that I want to review. I see that there's a lot of files that changed. Can you summarize each one for me so I can review them one by one? And then I'll say, keep each summary like 1 or 2 sentences so that it's easy to review. So that way it should be able to fetch information from GitHub or wherever you host your code directly, and summarize each file for me. And if I want to again dig into any particular aspect of this, so let's say this one saying this file updates the image rendering API route to read a custom name parameter routes, and I'll just go through it quickly. Page, card name picker, player card. So then I can say, okay, this summary is good enough. Let's just go ahead and mark that as viewed. Or you might say, okay, it's interesting that share changed. It says updates sharing utility functions to include and preserve custom name query parameter in platform intent URLs. I might say, okay, when I review this manually, I don't quite understand this part. How does that work? So I could say, okay, I don't quite understand this part. Can you explain this line by line? I think there's this question, about like craft and how much of the code do you need to understand? Do you want to understand? And this is, to me, the answer. You don't have to answer everything and understand everything manually necessarily, but you have to know that there is an always option to dig into however much depth you need to, line by line necessary. But tools like Antigravity are helpful for basically agentifying the process so that it's easier and faster. It doesn't mean that you lose control of your code. On the contrary, I think you gain more control by being able to dig into any parts of the code base more easily. So that is pretty much the entire, again, at least simplified SDLC, agentified. If you want to get more tips, I have an entire GitHub repo about it, so feel free to check, and there's a link to this slide deck as well.